What's up, everybody? This is Mr. Second Passport. Today we're going to cover what just happened to me this week in Guayaquil, Ecuador that scared the death out of me or the life out of me, when I was closing on a property I was selling that I mentioned earlier on this channel, maybe a few months ago now, and we went to close on it in a notary. And the process is way different, and I couldn't find any good information on it online when you're selling to someone who's been approved for bank financing than when you're just selling to someone for the normal in Ecuador, which is just straight cash. So let's take a quick look, right? Here's a little look at the title of the property I just sold. And first of all, the normal sales process in Ecuador, right? When you buy and sell, typically in cash, uh, first you usually sign a promeso de compra-venta, a promise of sale document, kind of stipulating that the buyer and the seller has usually 3 months to get the money together, get the documents together, and complete the sale. And make sure when you're selling a property in Ecuador to always get that deposit, require a deposit. Don't sign anything without requiring anything in return. Try to get at least a 10 or 20% deposit in order to secure the property, right? So I've seen gringos make that mistake and not get a deposit. So something to keep in mind. Number two, the second step. I mean, for me, it's just pretty much 4 steps, pretty straightforward. You want to prep the documents and the deed, and a lot of times it will require you, the seller, having to come due to pay up on the property taxes that aren't paid, the annual property taxes. Make sure those are up to date before you complete the sale. And they'll also want the buyer will ask for copies of this and that and the deed and the property taxes and all that as well, so they can go ahead and start getting together and compiling the new escrituras, or deed. That's the kind of the word in Spanish for it, escrituras, together, right? With their lawyer or even just their notary. If you want to save money in Ecuador and you're pretty confident, you're pretty trusting of the seller, usually notaries will put the deed together for you for a much lower price than if you paid a separate lawyer to do it, right, for you. So something to think about. You might just want to work straight through the notary with that, because the lawyer is going to still require you to go to the notary to do the official closing and signing anyway. So you might just want to work straight with the notary. And the third step, obviously, is going to the notary, both parties, buyer, seller, and a lawyer if you've involved one in the process, and or translator. And basically, it's time to sign the closing escrituras. And in this case, normally when it's a cash sale in Ecuador, the buyer will hand the seller a certified check, not just any check, but a certified check. And it's usually minus any capital gains taxes that the seller owes, because that's something the seller has to cover. And then usually with that money that they've withheld, the buyer will just go and pay those property tax, those capital gains taxes, so they can go ahead and transfer the property into their name, right? And that is the fourth step, is the buyer then going with the documents and paying the transfer taxes, which we'll cover in our next video, how to calculate really quick how much you're going to have to pay in both capital gains and transfer taxes here in Ecuador. I found a real easy way to do it, really good tool online. And basically, then the buyer registers the property in their name, and that's it. So quick 4-step process for a cash sale, but it changes a lot, which caught me off guard and got me very scared and running around a little bit this week in Guayaquil, right? So when you sell to someone on loan, right, then the process changes a lot, actually. And it starts out the same. First, you sign a promise of sale, right? But if it's a cash sale, some people might even skip the promise of sale and just go straight to the deed, uh, if they really want a quick sale. But you definitely need a promise of sale if you're going to go through a loan, right? If you're going to sell to someone who's been pre-qualified for a loan. So then you want to still make sure you get that deposit at the beginning when you sign the promise of sale, but then something changes. Then there's a new step. So the 1A would be you get the bank will send a perito or a guy who comes and gives an estimate of the property uh, for the bank itself, and they'll use that to base how much they can pre-qualify their client for. And then the second step, pretty similar to cash sale, you'll need to get the documents together and pay the any property taxes owed in order to go through with the sale and kind of compile the new deed together. But 2A, there's another step in here, and the seller, this is something I did on the fly because I didn't know, and the seller should confirm that the buyer is pre-qualified. What I did is, since they're not, the big difference is, as you see here in step 3, I'll skip ahead a bit to explain this, but when you go to a notary, which has happened to me this week here in Ecuador, and sign, I just found this out like a few hours before I was supposed to go sign. When you go to a notary and sign to someone who's buying with a bank loan in Ecuador, they don't hand you over any check, which is really scary for someone like me who has some experience buying and selling in Ecuador, and I'm used to getting that check or that bank transfer at the moment we're both sitting there in the notary with about to sign the closing documents. So I was supposed to go sign the property over to the buyer basically and not receive the check, which is a little bit, for me, it was startling and strange, and I didn't really like it. So, and I was like, I was almost not going to sign and just throw the thing away. Like, no, I'm not going to do it. But anyway, what I decided to do was I asked around my contacts here in Ecuador for someone who worked in the bank where supposedly the buyer was pre-qualified, and I did through a contact of a contact find someone who worked in the bank who could double check that the buyer was actually pre-qualified by the bank they said they were, which is actually the biggest bank in Ecuador in this case, Banco Pichincha. And my contact was able to get in touch with the buyer's rep or the loan officer in the bank that the buyer was using and confirmed that that loan officer did actually work for the bank, and the loan officer, and that the loan was actually approved because I actually went into a bank branch, a Banco Pichincha branch, um, trying to get this information, and they wouldn't give it to me. They said, no, we cannot confirm for you that this person has been qualified for this loan. Talk to their bank rep. So I guess I talked to the bank rep. I confirmed with the contact of mine that the bank rep did actually work for the bank because they weren't in the city I was in, right? The bank rep of the buyer was in Cuenca and I was in Guayaquil about to sell a property in Guayaquil. So I couldn't just walk into the bank and talk to them and confirm that they're real and that the buyer is in fact pre-qualified and there won't be any problems with the final payment, even though I signed the property over to them and I'm basically out of the picture, that they will in fact pay. So then I basically confirm that the loan officer does indeed work for the bank, and then I talked to the loan officer and I had them send me like a promissory note. They said they could do it like saying that the bank guarantees to pay set amount upon closing and registering of the deed. So I also educated myself with my contact that I didn't know this, but that's pretty much standard practice in Ecuador that the bank cannot send the funds for a property closing, a mortgage type deal, until the property is registered in the buyer's name, in the new person's name, right? Which is totally new to me and a little offset, a little unsettling to say the least. So then so that is the normal process, evidently, right? So I also confirmed that too. Like, is that normal? this process of having to register the property in the other person's name before they even pay me, I wasn't used to that either, right? So I called around, tried to confirm the validity of the bank rep and the pre-qualification of the guy selling, buying the property from me. And then we both went to the notary and we signed the escrituras. And what happened is the buyer was only pre-qualified up to 50,000, and I was selling a property for 82,000. So he did give me a check for the difference that I didn't get in the first step with the deposit, right? So you want to make sure, you want to be careful that you want to see how much they're pre-qualified for. I could have easily missed it, and make sure that they do pay you before you sign any difference there is between what you're actually selling for and what they've been qualified for from the bank. And that's what he did when we signed. He gave me a check for the difference of that. After the signing, the process continues, which kind of sucks. It kind of takes the fun out of selling a property and getting that check and having that finalized feeling like, it's over. It kind of takes the fun out of it for me. Because, this whole thing is just so unsettling because I have bought and sold in the U.S. too, where I'm originally from. And, you have escrow, right? You have title companies and title insurance and all these things. And it's just a way more organized process, safe. It just feels safer for both the buyer and the seller of a property. So, especially the seller. So, you make sure you're getting paid. So yeah, and then the step four is kind of similar to the cash sale. After the signing, but not the buyer. That's incorrect. Actually, the bank takes care of all the transfer taxes and registering the deed in their name. But before that, this is the step we're at right now. Just 2 or 3 days after the signing, is where I have to go to the bank maybe today and pay the amount that they said I need to pay with the for the capital gains tax. That in Ecuador, when you sell a property, the seller has to make sure that the annual property taxes are up to date, including the year in which you're selling, kind of similar to what I've seen in the U.S. But also the seller has to make sure that they pay the capital gains tax. All the other transfer taxes and all the notary fees usually pays the buyer, in case you're wondering. It's kind of how it works here in Ecuador. And so in this case, they asked me to go and pay the capital gains tax in the bank. They told me how much I need to pay, which in this case is $510. I'll explain how they got to that amount in my next video. And then basically, once I pay this, then the buyer will finish. Not the buyer, the bank will finish transferring the deed into the buyer's name with the lien attached in the bank's name, right? And then they will, after, they said this usually takes about 8 or so days. And this last step is once the signing of the property is completely registered over to the buyer, then usually about 2 days after that, the bank rep said, maybe every bank is a little different in Ecuador, they will disperse the funds to me. Supposedly, I hope, supposedly Banco Pichincha is the largest and most serious and safe institution in Ecuador. So I'm hoping everything works out okay. But that's kind of this step where I'm at now. I'm Mr. Second Passport. If you like this, don't forget to subscribe and the like button below. As you can see, this channel goes way deeper than just showing you where to buy hats or how to get a visa in Ecuador.